policy is something as the IPR department we felt has been very long overdue, um, owing to the fact that there has been a lot of ambiguity on the system which needs to be followed um, for advertisements and also for the payment of the advertising bills. So therefore, we felt it the need of the hour to come up with streamlining the entire system through an advertising policy. Also, we have kept in mind the fact that today advertising and the medium of advertising is also a very different environment from what it used to be, say, 10 years back. So looking at all those aspects, the kind of technology that has come in, the fact that social digital media, online media is playing such an important role also. So all these things have been factored in, and the IPR department has come up with an advertisement policy to streamline this and to also factor in the changes in the advertisement sector. And we brought it to the cabinet today. It was discussed and it has been cleared by the cabinet.
What are the features?
Key features, at least.
Okay, so the key features is that the Directorate of Information and Public Relations will henceforth be the nodal agency for the issuance of government advertisements and other agencies to impanel the print and media houses, print electronic media houses. We have also, under this policy, classified the various segments of media that is available, that is print, electronic media, online media, in terms of online news portals. Then we have also set the terms and conditions for empanelment, which are also included for print, electronic media, online news portals. Applications for empanelment with the government are to be submitted by the publishers or producers concerned in a prescribed form, which will be spelled out in the policy.
The tourism policy that we have created, the idea is really to give a proper shape and structure to the overall tourism sector, keeping in mind the current situation that is there in the overall sector. Now, what we see is that things are happening in tourism. A lot of things are happening, but then this not happening in a systematic and structured manner. And the policy is basically meant to give a complete shape to the entire process in which we want the tourism sector to grow. And therefore, we have realized that we need to look at aspects of, say, for example, sustainability. We are seeing that in many parts of the world where we want sustainable tourism to be there, there are certain guidelines as to how people can visit or should visit certain locations. So, for example, in the Living Root Bridge, is it good to have 1,000 people standing on the bridge every day? Or should it be controlled in some manner? So therefore, the policy will then define and look into these aspects on how to ensure that the sustainability of these kind of aspects. What I told you is just one part of it, but I'm just giving an example. There's going to be many aspects to it. So how do we make it sustainable and how do we make it a responsible tourism? How do we ensure that employment generation and entrepreneurship is achieved? How do we ensure that the local people are involved in the entire process? How do community participate in this aspect? How will the use of technology be to ensure that we're able to promote tourism in the best manner? And also how the different departments will work together to ensure that at the end we are able to really synergize between the different departments and get the maximum output when it comes to the tourism sector in terms of livelihood and in terms of sustainability and all the other aspects that I have mentioned. So this is what this basic tourism policy looks into. And of course, to achieve these ideas and these goals that we have, certain areas will have to be focused on. So, for example, we need to focus on creating the right infrastructure in many areas. That means rooms, that means roads, that means public facilities and utilities, so on and so forth. We need to also ensure that we're able to create better circuits, and we're able to improve the overall capacity of the people who are involved in the tourism sector. Say, for example, the drivers who are driving the taxis, or the guides who are guiding the tourist. Shouldn't we have a proper training program for them? Should we have a proper mechanism in which they are certified, maybe, and how they should be interacting with the tourist? So these capacity building aspects need to be looked at. We also need to see how we'll promote tourism as a whole, what kind of programs to have, how to do the marketing and branding, how to see that we'll be looking at the safety of tourists, how to ensure that tourists are safe when they come here, how community can participate in this whole thing. So all these aspects are there. For example, we also don't have certifications, we don't have standards. So for example, a particular, say, a homestay, if it's certified by, say, the government of Meghalaya or by the tourism sector, the tourism directorate, it will ensure that it builds up the confidence among the tourists also to stay in those locations. So these kind of aspects of branding, certification, and regulations, these are all areas, and the areas I mentioned before also, these are the things that will be covered in this tourism and policy. And as I said, the idea is to really give it a proper shape and ensure that we structure the entire sector in the process in which we move forward.
So what about the cleanliness of the tourist spots?
Yes,
Recently we have seen the famous tourist spots like Shadantland and Nokalikai. We have seen tourists are littering the place. So is there any policy to really penalize these tourists while coming to these tourist spots?
Yeah. So basically, the first part I mentioned, the sustainability. So in sustainability itself, apart from looking at the flow of tourists in a location and how much can that ecosystem actually sustain in the long run with the flow of tourists, aspects of waste management are also part of this. And within the waste management aspect, these policies to ensure that strict measures are taken for littering, and how to involve the local community into the entire process. So all of these are part of the policy.
So in this new policy, is there any scope for FDI?
See, FDI is something that is in general happening, and of course we are. I didn't mention all the points because it would have taken a lot of time. But the private sector participation is also very much a part of this entire policy. And the FDI is just a general thing, which in any case is also happening without it being specifically mentioned. But just to give you a sense, we are specifically mentioning about how the private sector participates, not just FDI, but the private sector, how they will play a role. For example, how we'll get professionals to get into the system, to train our people, or different services that the private sectors can provide. So all of these aspects obviously will be looked into.
So we can say that tourism sector will have the involvement of private sector as well.
Yes, tourism sector has to have the involvement of the private sector. Tourism sector cannot be run by the government, and the idea of us bringing this policy is to ensure that we're able to create livelihood, and in order to create the livelihood without the people in the private sector being involved, it won't happen. So definitely, government, we maintain, should not be in the business of running different programs. We should be providing, and we should be only facilitating the entire process, and the rest of the things should be run by the private sector.
So what is the kind of revenue that we are looking at if this policy is being implemented?
No, obviously, our target is to increase the overall, contribution of the tourism sector into the GDP. It is, of course, I don't have the exact numbers right now with me, but it is below 10% in terms of the contribution to the entire GDP, state GSDP. So therefore, we are looking at more contributions. So obviously, if you look at the points that I have mentioned to you, so when we'll have more rooms coming up, when we'll have more overall, the guides coming up or taxis coming up. So obviously, all of this and flow of tourists coming in, different activities happening, all this will lead to the contribution and the revenue of the public as well as the government going up, and we obviously expect to see having a huge impact on the overall GSDP of the state. So numbers, of course, we don't have numbers because these are things which are not simple to calculate. It's very complicated. But definitely, the whole idea of having this structure and this policy is to ensure that the contribution of the sector is much more than what it is today.
What about
the tourism in the film?
Yeah. Yes, it is. It is very much included. Again, as I said, I didn't mention all of those aspects because there's too much to say. But yes, apart from many other things like music and like sports and other activities that are there, obviously the filmmaking is definitely something that is also part of our agenda. So basically, it's one has to understand that we have to balance things out. It's not as simple as saying that today we are using fertilizers and tomorrow we just stop it and we're going to shift to organic farming in one go. Everything has to be in a transition format. And therefore, the livelihood of people and especially in the vegetable growing section, we have seen that chemical fertilizers are still being used, and it is required in some areas, and it is taking time for the organic fertilizers to really have that kind of impact. So yes, if you are saying that it's going to be black and white and we're going to completely shift to organic tomorrow, that's not going to happen. It takes time. It's a process. We need to continue to ensure that the people are taken on board. We need to ensure that people are given the options and given the alternative to move forward. And that's what this organic mission is, not organic mission, but the policy, The policy is what it intends to do, is to shift towards this, and slowly and steadily we will see that most of the, number one, the areas which are not using chemical fertilizers that much, at least they will be then getting incentives or structures or systems to move into organic farming and get the support that they want to do. Then of course there are areas which are using them. Then we will work towards how we'll see that we will slowly shift them from, say, chemical fertilizers to, say, organic fertilizers. But as I said, for us to do that, we also have to keep in mind that there are people who depend on this chemical fertilizers. There are vegetables that need this, and hence for us to completely cut it off and say we will not do it from tomorrow would not be just, and would require us to really consider the livelihood of the people. And that's why it's a process, but we are moving towards that.